Hello everyone, this is Ashley Tucker from My Favorite Things, and today I'm sharing a couple of card sets that I created with a rainbow theme. Now, I like to put together these card sets and then give them as gifts to people in my family. I have a couple of different family members that really like to get these packs of cards from me that they can then give to other people. So the first thing that I did is I pulled out my patterned paper and I went through all of it and I picked out all of the sheets that I thought would work for my cards. And in the end, I ended up picking out 9 different pieces of patterned paper. So because I picked out 9 pieces of paper, I knew that I also needed 9 pieces of colored cardstock. So I picked out a rainbow of colors of different cardstock and I made sure that there were 9 different colors. I also cut down each of those panels to make sure that they were all A2 size. Then I took this die which says sending you hugs and I cut it out of the center of each of those 9 panels of colored cardstock. I made sure that I kept every single letter by popping them out into a little dish. I didn't want to lose any letters because I'm going to be using them on my patterned paper cards. Each of the different pieces of patterned paper that I picked out is going to be a background on a card in one of the 2 sets. So I cut each of those panels down so that I had a piece that was 5 by 3 3/4. Using a tape runner, I adhered all of those backgrounds onto some A2 size card bases. This is where having pre-made card bases comes really in handy. Each of the 2 sets that I'm creating has 9 different cards in them, so in the end I made 18 cards, which is quite a few cards, and it really helps when you don't have to create all of those card bases. Next, I took each of my die-cut panels of colored cardstock and I lined them up onto the card base with the patterned paper, and I just taped them down onto that card base with some Post-it tape, so it's just temporarily adhered. I'm going to be using those panels as templates for adhering all of my letters. To make gluing down all of these letters a little bit easier, I organized them into piles so that each of the little piles was a different letter. Using my liquid adhesive, I very carefully traced each of the letters with dots of glue so that when I lifted up the card panel, I could make out the letters in those dots of glue and I knew where to place my letters. Now you could be a little bit more accurate by placing those letters right into the die cut and just using it as a guide for placing them, but I actually find this way a lot easier and a lot faster, and I don't mind if the letters are a little bit off. If you decide to go that route and puzzle piece your letters into the die cut, you run the risk of the glue oozing out of the sides and adhering to the top panel. And because I plan on using all of these top panels for other cards, I didn't want to risk ruining them. Once I had all of the letters placed on my patterned paper set, I took all of the panels of colored cardstock off of the top of each of those cards, and I'm going to be creating a second set of cards using those. So back when I was cutting down all of these panels to the A2 size, I cut a second piece of each of the 9 colors, and that piece is a little bit smaller, and it's going to go behind all of those panels. I paired up each of those smaller panels of the cardstock with the 9 larger ones that are die cut, and I made sure to use different colors that looked good together. For example, right here I'm using the pink small panel and I'm popping up the red one on top. So I grabbed 9 card bases and I glued down that smaller panel in the center with some liquid adhesive, and then I popped up the die cut panel with some foam tape. Alright, so at this point we have 18 cards done, and they're fairly simple with just that die cut sentiment on all of them. You could pack it up here and call it done, but I always like to take it a little bit further. So I grabbed these really cute critters from the Missing You Every Single Day stamp set, and I'm stamping them with my Misty tool onto some Neenah Solar White cardstock with some Copic friendly black ink. Now, I cut out that row of critters using my paper trimmer, and then I stuck my paper right back into my Misty so that I could stamp them again a second time. And I actually ended up doing this 3 more times so that I had a total of 20 of those cute little animals. I colored all of the animals in using my Copic markers. I didn't end up leaving a lot of the coloring in the video because this video is already going to be pretty long and the coloring was quite simple. I do have some other videos on the MFT channel that you can check out if you want to see more in-depth coloring with Copic markers. Once the coloring was done, I used the coordinating dies to cut each of those animals out, and I set them aside in a little dish until I needed them. I also decided that I wanted to put a second sentiment on each of my cards. Now, the reason that I chose the sentiment that I did for the die cut is because I thought that it was kind of a generic statement, sending you hugs. I thought that it could work for several different occasions. So I thought that by putting a second sentiment, I could narrow down each of those occasions and make it a different kind of card depending on what that second sentiment said. Now, stamping and cutting out 18 sentiment strips sounds a little bit daunting and time-consuming, but using my MISTI tool made it go a lot quicker. I picked out 6 different sentiments and I put them in my MISTI, and I stamped them 3 times. These 6 sentiments are from the Greetings and Salutations stamp set, as well as the Pawty Time stamp set. That's P-A-W-T-Y Pawty, not the other kind of potty. And the first 2 times that I stamped them with Versamark ink onto a dark blue cardstock, and I embossed them with a white embossing powder. And the second time, I stamped them with VersaFine Onyx Black ink onto some white cardstock. I cut out each of those sentiments into a strip and I added foam tape to the back. I lined them all up and I lined up all of my animals and I got to work putting everything together. Now, I did the layout for each of the cards exactly the same way. I didn't want to get crazy by doing different layouts for every card because I wanted to keep it as simple as possible because it was already a lot of work. When you're making 18 different cards, you gotta try to keep it as simple as possible. I struggle with keeping things simple. This is definitely a little bit more complicated than some people might want to do for a card set, but this is simple for me. If you did want to make it a little bit more simple and have the second sentiment still, you could stamp them on the inside of the card instead of making the sentiment strips. I wanted to add some really simple embellishments to each of my cards, mostly because the upper left-hand corner of the card seemed a little empty, so I wanted to add some embellishments there to kind of balance the design. For my set of cards with the colored cardstock, I chose these enamel heart stickers, which are really easy to place because they're already sticky, and they really go with the rainbow theme. When I got to my patterned paper cards, I was nearly out of those heart stickers. So instead, I took out these tiny little heart embellishments. These are kind of a rose gold color, and I glued them down with tiny little dots of liquid adhesive. After that, all 18 of my cards are done, and here's the first set. I wanted to show you each of the finished cards, and I grabbed 9 white envelopes to go with this set, and I grabbed another 9 envelopes to go with my second set, and here are each of those. Now, these cards did take me a little while to make, but considering the fact that I made 18 cards, it actually was fairly quick. I'd say that I created all of these in the time that I'd normally spend on 2 to 3 cards. Using some twine, I tied together the sets of cards with their envelopes so that they're ready to be given as gifts. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video and that it gave you some ideas and inspiration. If you've never given anybody a card set before, I hope that you'll give it a try and see what they think. I hope you have a lovely day today, and I'll see you next time.